Hi there. In this video, we will create an ASP.NET 6 MVC application from scratch, and we will perform CRUD operations on a SQL Server database using Entity Framework Core. This will be an amazing application for beginners who want to learn more about CRUD operations, or if you want to refresh your memory using .NET 6 MVC. Let me take you through the app that we will create. We will create a new .NET 6 application from scratch, and it'll be an MVC template. And from this functionality over here, we can add a new employee. So let me give the details. And once you have given all the details, you can click on the submit button, and on a successful submit, it takes you back to the home page. And you can change the details of an employee by viewing their details, and you can see the details over here, and you can change their details, one or many. And once you're done, you can submit this button and their details will be updated as well. If you want to delete an employee, you can again go back to the view details and you can click on this delete button to delete their details. I hope you like this video, and if you do, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this one. With that said, let's get into it. I have created a folder for myself in which I'm going to create my ASP.NET 6 MVC CRUD application. And I will open Visual Studio, and first of all, I will create a new project using this button. From the templates page, I will search for the MVC template. And if you see over here, we have an ASP.NET Core web application, but this one uses Razor pages, but we are interested in the MVC one. So I'll scroll down further and until I find this one, which says ASP.NET Core web app, and in brackets model view controller, which is MVC. So I will select this one and click next. In here, I will give a project and a solution name and also a location. So I will copy this location path and then I will give a project name. So I will call this one ASP.NET MVC CRUD. Or you can give a different name as well and click next. From here, I will select the framework, and from the drop down, I will select .NET 6, which is the latest at the time of this recording. And I will keep the defaults as it is. I don't need any authentication, and I will configure this for HTTPS. So I will click on this create button to create this application. Visual Studio has created an MVC app for us, and it has created a default controller. And you can tell that this is an MVC app because it has the models view controller folders. And also if you come to the program.cs file, it is telling the services that I'm using controllers with views, and also to the middleware we are giving the controller route, and it has given a default route which goes to controller name /action name /id, and that's optional as well. And as a default value, we are using the home controller and the index action in the home controller. So if I go on to the controllers, open the home controller and see the index action, this is what it is showing when I first load the application. So let's start the application to see what we get out of the box. When we run our application, we see this home page, and it goes to home by default. It doesn't show it in the URL, but if I say /home/index, this is the same page, which is the home page, which comes to the screen by default when we run our application. And we have a privacy page as well, which is again in the home controller. So we are going to make use of this home page, and we are going to show the employee list over here and then perform CRUD operations in it. I have come back to my application, and we want to use Entity Framework Core, which is an ORM, and by using Entity Framework Core, we are able to talk to a database. In this case, we are going to use a SQL Server database, and we are going to store and retrieve employee list from that database. So in order to use Entity Framework, we have to install it first. And to install Entity Framework, we are going to come here to dependencies, right click on that and click on Manage NuGet Packages. In the browse section, we will search for two packages one by one. So I will first search and install this package, which is Microsoft.entityframeworkcore.SQL Server. So I will search over here. This is the package. So I will select and install this one. By using this package, we want to tell Entity Framework that we want to use SQL Server database. So, make our connections, and we want to be able to perform CRUD operations using this package. The second package that we want to install is this Microsoft.entityframework core.tools package. And this package is responsible for performing the migrations. And migrations is basically when we want to create a new database or make changes to the database using our application. That's where migrations. Now that we have installed these two packages, it's now time to create a dbContext class. A dbContext class is basically a class file which acts as a bridge between Entity Framework Core and our database. And using this class and the properties of this class, we are able to talk to the database and perform the CRUD operations. So let's create this class first. I will close this and I will create this class inside a folder. So I will first create a folder. I will call this data. And inside this data folder, I will create a class file. And I will call this class file MVC demo dbContext. We have created this class file, and this dbContext class file inherits from a base class, which will be dbContext. And this dbContext class comes from Entity Framework Core. So we have to pull in the dependencies. I am going to press Control dot to use this library, which we have installed using Microsoft.entityframework core. And then we want to create a constructor for this class. So a shortcut is if you come over here and click on this MVC context or whatever your class name is, now press Control dot and use the generate constructor method with the options parameter so that you can pass the options back to the base class. Now that we have created the constructor, it's now time to create a property. And as I said earlier, properties are used to access the tables that Entity Framework Core will create in our database. So I will create a property with the shortcut prop and then press tab twice. And then you want to have this property as a DB type of DB set, and then DB set of something. So we want to create a model which we will be able to use as a domain model or entity, because we want to create employees and perform CRUD operations on employees. So we will create an employee model. So let's create an employee model. So under models, I can actually come over here and create a new folder called domain models, or just domain because it's residing under models. And then in the domain models, I will add a new class and call this employee. Add that. Now we want to have a few properties for the employees, and Visual Studio is suggesting one for me. So we want an ID, but this will be of type GUID, which will be a unique identifier. The next property I want is the name. So let's tab to that, and Visual Studio is smart enough to give me the name property. After that, I want the email, let's say. So prop, it's of type string, and that will be the email property. So the name of the property is email. After that, we can add salary, so a property, and I'm just keeping it as an int or a long here, but you can use double or you can use double, and that should work fine. So salary. After that, we can have the last property as a string property, and we can say department. So which department is this employee under? And I can also have a date of birth property just to show date time as well. And that will be date of birth. So we have our properties defined for the employee domain model, and this is what we want to persist in the database and then further retrieve the list of employees and a single employee as well. So we are going to use this domain model inside our dbContext class. So over here, this dbSet property will be of type employee. And then I will use control dot to use this from the domain models over here. And then we want a name for the property. So I will call this employees, and this will be the same name. So this will be the table name that gets created ultimately from the EF core migrations. Now we have created this DB context. It's now time to inject this inside the program.cs file, because otherwise our application would have no idea about the DB context and what properties we want to create. So we will open the program.cs file, and after this add controller views method, I want to add or inject this DB context inside our services. So I will use builder.services.add DB context, and that takes a type. So I will give the type, which is MVC demo DB context. And I will again press control dot to use this from the data folder. And after that, it takes some options. So I will say options such that I will come to the next line, options dot, and I want to use it as in a SQL Server database, this DB context. So I will say use SQL Server and press control dot again to use this from this library, which is Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. And this method, use SQL Server, takes a connection string as a string type. So we can either hard code it over here, or it is a good practice. I'll just first close the brackets. It's a good practice to get your connection string stored in the app settings.json. So I will store this in the app settings.json and then retrieve it from here. So first of all, I will come over here, and in here I want to create my connection string property. So after the allowed hosts, I will press comma, and inside the double quotes, I have this connection strings property, and the key value pair I want to define is the name first and then the value. So the name for this one would be MVC demo connection string. And the name is important later on, I'll just tell you now. But the value of this one would be something similar to this. So we want to give the server information, then the database information, and then we want to specify that this is a trusted connection. So trusted connection is equal to true. So I will copy this and paste it over here. And then I want to specify the values over here. So the server that I have installed inside my machine is called Microsoft, is localhost / this server name. Yours could be something similar or something different depending on what the instance name was when you were installing your SQL Server. So I will use this name in the server property, and then I want to give a database name. And if I show you, I'll connect to this, and this is the databases I have. So I don't have any database at the moment. So I want to create a new database. So whatever name you will give here gets created inside your SQL Server. So I will give the name as MVC demo DB, and you can name it something different if you want to. So now we have created the connection string, and we can go back to our program.cs file and mention the connection string name over here. So I will get the name from app settings by using builder.configuration.get connection string, and then this takes a name as a string. So the name of the connection string name is this. If you have a different name, use the name that you have in your application. I will copy this and paste it over here. So I'll put this in a second line as well. So we have injected our DB context as well. Now it's time to actually run Entity Framework Core migrations and create our new database. So I will come to Tools, and I will go to NuGet Package Manager and come to Package Manager console. And over here, I want to run two commands. The first command that I want to run is this command, which is add-migration. So I will copy this, paste it over here. and then I will put a space, and then inside quotes, I will mention the name to this migration. So we are performing this for the first time because our database doesn't even exist. So I will give this a name of initial migration, and then press enter to start the migration process. So behind the scene, what's happening is it is reading the employee.cs class because that's our dbset property, and it is creating this as a migration so that we can use this migration later on to create a table inside SQL Server database. So we have created a migration and we have a new folder over here, which is migrations. The next step we want to perform is to run the second command, which is to actually update the database using this migration. So I will come over here and paste this command, update-database, and press enter. And this will use the migration, compare it to the database. Because the database doesn't exist, it will actually run the commands to create the database. So it has run the commands successfully. And if I show you, I will refresh the list of databases. And now we can see the MVC demo DB appearing in our list of databases. So we have the new database created for us successfully using Entity Framework Core. The next step that we want to perform is to create a few pages from which we can create, update, delete, and view all these employees and perform other actions on these employees. So I can close these, and I want to create a new controller, and I will name this one employees controller. So I will right click, add a new controller, and I will choose an MVC empty controller. I will name this employees with the word controller.cs. In this controller, I will have index methods so that I can show the list of employees. But first, let's add a functionality, or let's create a functionality to add a new employee as well. So we will start from there, and then once we have an employee in our database, then we will use that employee to show it in the list of employees that we want to show on the screen. So the first action method, I can actually just make use of this one, and I want to create a method called add, which will be used as employees/add to add a new employee. And this will be the get method. So I will decorate this with the HTTP get method keyword, and then also add a view for this. So I will right click over here, add a view, and it's a razor view empty. Click on add, and then I want to call this not index but add.cshtml. And if you see over here, we have a new folder now inside the views folder, which is employees, and then inside the employees folder we have a new cshtml, which is our razor pages template, and then that's the name of the view is add view. So we will use this view to add a new employee. So to also being able to navigate to this page, I will create under the shared layout page, I will add another tab along with the privacy and the home, which will be called add employee. And the controller name for this one would be employees because we have the employees controller, and the action would be add action because we have created an action called add under the employees controller. It's now time to run our application to see how it looks like and are we able to navigate to the add page or not. So for that, I will start my application, and you can see we added a new list item in the nav bar. So if I hover over this, you can see on the bottom left hand side, we are able to go to the employees controller and the add action. So if I click on this one, I get to a new page, the URL changed, and the routing presents us the add view that we created in the last few minutes. So now we want to create a form from which we can add a new employee, And because we are using Bootstrap 5, we'll make use of Bootstrap classes so that we are able to make our UI pretty quickly. So I'll search for forms over here and open this page. And from this form, I'll just select a basic form and I will copy this text and I will change it back in my application. So I'll stop this and I will open the add.cshtml, and in here I will paste this form. Now I want to get rid of these extra divs because we just want to copy the structure and not everything. And I will first start with the form. So I want to tell this form that this is the method of post, and then I also want to give an action to it. So when this is posted, it goes to the add method. So in our controller, it goes to the add post method, which we don't have at the moment, but we will create one soon. So it goes to the add action method. And then we have a label. So I'll remove this for a label for email address. The first property we want the user to fill is the name. And then this will come from a view model. So let's create a view model first. Inside models, I will right click and add a new class. And I will call this add employee view model. Click add. And then I will have 4 properties in this one, or maybe 5, but this properties would be similar to what we have as a domain model. So I will copy all these properties, but I will not copy the ID property because I don't want my user to give me the ID property. I want to assign this created user a new ID property. So we will give that behind the scene. So with these properties, I want the values to be coming from the browser. So with that, I will come back to my CSHTML, and on the top here, define the model. And then this will be coming from the newly created model that we have, which is inside models. And that's the add employee view model. And now we can say after this, we can say this is ASP4, and we'll say name, because it's recognizing that name is a property of this view model. So what value the text box has, it is assigning that property value to this name property. Similar to this, we will have the email address, and actually I'll change this from type email to text. The second property is an actual email address, and that's of type email, and the ASP4 is email. The third property that we will get from the user is, let's see what we want to get, is the salary. So we will say, or from the admin actually, we'll say salary as the label. And then this will be of type number. And then this will be for the property salary. Similarly, we want to add 2 more fields. One will be for the date of birth. So label of date of birth. And then this is of type date. And then the ASP4 is for the property date of birth. And finally, it's the department field. And we will have the label of department. The ASP4 as department. And type is just a text field. And after that, we have a button which is of type submit, and we have this Bootstrap classes given to it, and it just says submit. So we'll save that and we will run this application to see how our form is looking like, and then we will create our post method inside the controller. So this is loading up now, and if I refresh this, so you can see if I go to add employees, I can see a name, email address, salary, date of birth, which is a date type. So we get a date picker as well if you're using Chrome and Firefox or Opera, and you get a department field as well. And that's nicely wrapped inside a container. And I can also give it a heading. So I'll add an h1 element and say add employee, and maybe give a class to the form with a margin top of 5, so that we have some space between this form and the h1 tag. So it's hot reloading at this moment. So now we can see our heading and some space in here as well. So that's looking nice. Now we want, when we submit the form, we should be able to get the values here in a post method. So let's create that post method now. And I will stop the application. And I will annotate this method with the HTTP post keyword. And I'll say public iAction result. The method name is add. And this add method would require one parameter, which will be the model itself. So I will say this model, and I will import the dependency from models. And now I can give a name to this request object. So I'll say request, or we can say add employee request. And now we can use this value to call entity framework core so that it can save our values to the database. But before that, we have to do a conversion from this model to an employee model. So I will say where employee is equal to new employee, and it's not a controller. This is coming from domain models. So I'll import that, and I will give the ID property because I want to assign this new employee a new ID property. So I'll say a GUID, new GUID, and then the rest of the properties can be taken from the request object. So name becomes name, and then email is coming from is equal to add email, add request dot email, and then salary is coming from add employee request dot salary. Then we have department, which is coming from the request as well, and then finally the date of birth. And with those fields, we have our employee populated, we have our entity or domain model ready, and now it's just a matter of time to use entity framework core and specifically the DB context to save this entity to the database. For that, because if you remember, we injected this DB context inside the services, we are able to use this DB context inside the controller now. So I will come over here and create a constructor. So CTOR as a shortcut and press tab twice. And now we can inject the injected service here in the controller's constructor. So I will say MVC DB context and use this from the data, give it a name, and then I will say MVC as a name, and then press control dot to create an assign field. So now I can use this private read-only field and talk to our database. I will say this dot add, and then I can pass this employee object to this. Actually, before the add, I will say this dot employees dot add, and then pass the employee over here like this. And after adding the employee, I want to save the changes. So I will say db context dot save changes, because if you don't do that, entity framework doesn't save the changes to the database. So you'll have to actually remember to use this line. And once this has been done, we will redirect our user to the index page, which we don't have at the moment. So we will just not do anything at the moment. We'll just return the view for now, or let's say return it to the add method. So redirect to action. The name of the action is add. So we will just return this back to add for now. And without even running this, we can convert this method to an asynchronous method. Let's see how. To do that, we will add an async keyword over here and wrap this action result inside a task. And now the structure is ready, but to order to use the add synchronous methods, asynchronous methods, we will use the add async method, which is available to us. And then we use the await keyword over here. And also the save changes changed to save changes async. And because we are using an async method, let's use the await keyword in front of it. So now this method becomes totally in asynchronous, and our form is calling this asynchronous method. So let's start this application now to see if we are able to get the values or not. And also I'll add a breakpoint so that we can see the values coming in. Our application has started, so I'll come to the add employee page, and I will fill some values here. So I'll start with my name. This is a fake email, of course. I'll give some salary and some date of birth. And then a department, let's say IT. And if I submit, I have a breakpoint over here. It comes to the HTTP post method of the add action. So our form is working correctly. If I hover over the request, we can see all the values in the form now coming inside our form, our post method. So we can use these values and persist it in our database. So I will go on. This is converting our view model to our model, and then asynchronously adding it to the database. And I'll just continue from here. So it reloads back to the page again. And if I come to see the database, our table should now have a new value. So if I open the employees table, our employees table now has a new row inside it, which was added when we filled up that form. So it's our add action is working correctly now. Now that we have a single entry in the database, we can come back to our application and start the work on showing the list of employees on the main screen, which is in the controller. We'll have index action methods. So I will minimize all of this and create an index method over here. So that'll be of type get. So I will decorate it with the HTTP get keyword, and I will write public iAction result, and the name would be index. And this will be the list that we will show to the user. And to show this list, we need to talk to the database to get all the employees that we can that are stored in the database. So let's make this method asynchronous first. Again, we decorate it with the async keyword and wrap the iAction result inside a task. Now we can use the private field DB context to talk to the employees folder, which is a property of this context class. And then we want to get all the items. So I'll use the toList async method, which is not available to us right away. So I'll use control dot and import this library using Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. And now because this is an async method, I will use the await keyword on it. Now we are getting the employees. I'll store this inside a variable, and we are getting the employees. We want to display this into a view. So we don't have a view at the moment. So I will create a view, right click on this action and add a view. It's an empty view. And the name of this method or the view is index.cshtml. Click on add. I will remove these lines, and actually I will add the model over here because we know the model. It will be a list of type employee. So I will first import the employee from the models folder, which is in the domain, and then employee. And it will be a list of that. So a list of this employee. And now it's time for us to use this. And again, similar to how we did before, I'll use the h1 tag first to show that this is an employees list. So employees. And then after that, I will have a for loop that can loop through this model and display all the employees in a table. So I will first create a table, and the table will have a class of type table, which is a bootstrap class. So we will use that. And first of all, we will start with the head section. So T head, and T head will have a single row. So TR, and TR will have a few headings, which is TH. So the first heading would be ID. Then we will have the name, the email, and then the salary, the date of birth, and finally the department. And now we want to create the T body for the table. So the T body will again have a TR, but TRs will be looped from all the results that are coming back from the database. So I will start a for each loop. For each loop, and the collection is the model, and we'll say in the individual employee, so employee in model. And now we will start the row. So TR will have a few TDs, namely these TDs. So TD, I will copy paste it a few times. So the ID of the first column is ID. So it will come from this employee.id using the @ symbol. So employee.id. And similarly, I'll have other employee details as well. And the second column is name. Then we have the email. After that, we have the salary. And then we have the date of birth, which I will convert it to a string, and I'll pass a format to that. So let's say DDMMYYYY, or you can choose your own format as well. And finally, we'll have the department as well. I will press Ctrl KD to format this document. And this way we are showing all the details coming back from the this database using the DB context, and we are passing it to the view. So let's pass this model to the view. So I will say return view, and I will pass employees to it. So let's see this in action. I will run my application. We have started our application, but we don't have a page to see all the employees. So we will quickly add that to the layout page. And before the add employee button, we will have a button which goes to the employees controller and open or access the index method or action. And the name for this would be employees. Save that and let hot reload do its magic. And if we come back and refresh, it actually didn't work. So maybe it's still doing it. I will press hot reload one more time and refresh the application. And now we can see the employees page. So if I click on employees, it's talking to our database and getting the result back and displaying it on the screen correctly. So as you can see, it was very simple to fetch the data for the employees back from the database. We only have a single employee and hence the single row. And we also created the add functionality, so we can quickly add another employee just to show you. And we can also navigate this back to the employees page when this is a success. So let's do that and see if hot reload works in that as well. When the add is successful, we want to redirect it back to the index page. So I will save that. And I want to press hot reload just one more time. And here I will refresh my application and add a new employee. Let's say Jason D. and give it some salary and some date of birth. And this is in the HR department. So I will submit it and expect it to go back to the employees page if our hot reload was successful. So I'll submit it. Oh, I have a breakpoint over here, hence the time taken. So I'll remove the breakpoint and press continue. And over here, it saved the employee to the database, and then it came back to the employees page. And now we can see 2 employees in our list of employees. So we have created 2 functionalities from the CRUD. It's now time to able to access one of these items so that we can update them or delete them. So for doing that, we want to have a view button just over here somewhere. So I will come back to the application, and inside the index.html, I want to add another heading with a space and a view button. So inside the TD, I will have an anchor element, and that is going to employees / view. And we also want to give the ID to this one as well, and I will just name this view. And we want to give the ID. So the ID to this would be employee.id. Save that, and just because I want to press this one more time so that it works correctly, refresh this. We have the view button, and if we see down, we can see the link as localhost 7262 /employees /view / the ID of that employee that we want to see. Now it's time to create that view action method inside our employees controller. So I will come back to our application, stop it this time, and then inside the employees controller, I want to add the view functionality. So I will start with the get method, and the function would be public I action result. The name was view for the action method, and this will have a GUID type coming in. So a GUID with the name of ID, and let's see if that works correctly or not. I will just have this, and let's say return the view, and also add this view because it doesn't exist at the moment. It will be an empty razor page with the view name of view, and I can close this for now and put a breakpoint over here. And when I run my application, I want to see if this ID field is getting populated correctly or not. We will go to the employees page and click on any one of the employees that we have. So let's say I click on the second employee, that is my name. And if we see the ID, it's showing me the ID for me. Let's compare. It ends with 6E8. And if we go back to the database and execute this, it ends with 6E8. So it's giving us the ID to the employee, that is my name. And using this ID, we should be able to retrieve all the details of this employee from the database again. So let's stop our application and work on that. I will come into this method. I want to retrieve a single employee this time. So using the DB context again, I will talk to the employees table and get a single employee. So I'll say first or default async and pass x such that x dot id is equal to the ID that we are trying to fetch. And this will return us a result. So let's say employee. And this employee could be an actual employee, or it could return a null result because the ID doesn't exist in the database. So we will first check if employee is equal to null. And you can check this over here, or let's pass this directly to the employee to the view and let the view handle that. And we'll say, this employee doesn't exist, or you can also just stay on the page and show an error. So it's a lot of ways you can do it. We will pass this to the employee and let the employee view handle it. So now we want to go to the view and show this employee first. And we will use not this employee, but we will use a different view model this time, because we want to have a segregation between the employee model and its view model. So we will create a different view model. I will add a new class to the models folder, and here I will say the update, or let's say the update view model, update employee view model. And this will have similar properties of how we have in the employee. So almost the same, exactly the same, to be honest, because we also need the ID property to come back so that we can check if the ID exists or not. And now using this model, I can say at model, and I will get this model from the models folder, and this is the update employee view model. Now we want to add a form here as well, and first display it, but later on we would have to use a submit button to edit the form. So I will go to the add view and copy this form because we can reuse a lot of it. We will change the heading from add to edit employee. And then this will be a post method. The action would go to the view action, or you can call it update as well, but you have to change that in the controller as well. So it will be the view action, and we want another field which will be the ID. So we want the ID over here as well as a first column, which will be of type text, but I will assign a read only attribute to it so that the user is not able to change it. And with that, let's run our application again to see if it's able to populate and display the fields correctly or not. But before we do that, I think I'm missing a conversion here. We want to not pass this employee object, but we want to pass this update employee object. So I'll create a new view model is equal to new update employee view model, and the properties will be similar to what we had. So I will use this and change it quickly. So this will be employee.id, and then employee.name, employee.salary, department, and date of birth. And okay, we got it. So because this was an async method, it's not allowing us to use it because we don't have it. So we want to use the await keyword and also make this whole method as asynchronous. And you know the drill, async, wrap this inside a task, and now you can use the await keyword. So using that, we are able to get it, and it's showing me this could be a potential error because the result from this method could be a null. So we will say if employee is not null, then do this conversion, and then also return it. Return the view with this new variable. Otherwise, we can just redirect this back, redirect to action index, for example. So with those changes, now we should be able to test our application. I'll start this one. We will go to our employees page and let it get the results from the database. And let's view this employee. So I'll click on the view button, and it has gathered the data from the database again, and it's displaying it nicely inside this form. And we are able to update these fields, and we should be able to add a new functionality so that it can take these updated values and return back to the employees page. So let's create the functionality for the update method now. I will come back to my application, stop this one, and have a post method for this view action. So I will say HTTP post, and I'll make this async from the beginning. So public async action result, and this will be the action name view. It takes the update model, which is coming from the form that we just saw. And then we want to first convert this, or we want to actually find if the ID exists or not, the one we are trying to change. So we will say, we will first try to get the employee from the database. So employee is equal to, using the DB context. So await DB context employee dot, you can also use the find method. So I'll use the find async method and pass the primary key, which is the model.id. And that way you should have an employee here. And if you have an employee, so let's say if employee is not equal to null, then we want to actually update the values of this employee, but not the ID property, but rest of the values. So I will update the name from what's coming from this model, and similarly the other fields as well. So email becomes from the request email. We have the salary, which is coming from the model.salary. Then we have date of birth, which is coming from date of birth over here. Then we have the department, which is coming from the department from this request. So now we have updated our existing employee. It's now time to save these changes. So we will use the context MVC DB context dot save changes async, and it's an async method. So we will use the await keyword. And using that, we have saved the changes. Once that is all successful, we want to return the user back to the employees page. Return redirect to action. We want to return this back to the index page. And if it doesn't work all right, I'm just using the same. If you don't find an employee, you'll have to send this to an error page telling the user that this employee was not found, but I won't be covering that at the moment. So with that, you should be able to update the employee. We are getting an error over here. It's saying, since this is an async method, must be an I action result rather than a type of I action result. So we want to make use of the await keyword and then run this view as a task. So task dot run, and then use the method like this and close the bracket as well. So using that, we are running this task, and also provide the name of the view. So we'll say the view is view. Save that, and now if we run the application, let's test if we are able to view and change the details for this employee or not. So now we want to go to the employees page and pick an employee that we want to change. We'll use this top one, and in here I want to change a few details. Let's say Jason D becomes Jason Devon, and then change the email as well. Maybe change the salary, and let's decrease the salary. Change the date of birth, and just confirming that all the changes are reflected back in the database. And let's change the department from HR to human resources. And now if we click on the submit button, it's gone back to the database to change the make the changes and save it. And now you can see the reflection of those changes as well. So if I show you the database, refresh this one more time, and now we can see that the changes are reflecting now in the database as well. So our update functionality is working. It is now time to work on the final part of the CRUD operations, which is the delete functionality. So for that, I will come back to my application, And we want to add a delete button on the view page. So when we are able to see the details, we want to add another button. So I will copy this button and paste it over here. This will be again of type submit, and the class for this one would be a danger class so that it shows up in red. And we want to give an ASP action and an ASP controller for this one. But before we do that, I will also change the name, the value of this button. We'll call this delete so that it's clear that it's the delete button. And we want to add these two informations here. But before that, let's create a new action method inside the employees controller. So after the view, I will add another post method, HTTP post, and I will use public the same as above, async task of type iAction result, and then I will call this method delete. And delete method would take the same form view model because the form's ideally the same. We want to take in the view model and we want to use the ID property from this view model. So I want to define, I want to take this ID property, go to the context and tell it to delete. So I will say, I will first fetch the employee. So employee is equal to, and use the context. I will say MVC DB context dot employees dot find, and I will pass the ID model dot ID, and we'll use the async version, find async, and use the await keyword over here. Now, if we are able to get the employee, so if employee is not equal to null, then we will delete this employee. So we will tell DB context to remove this employee. So employees dot remove, and then we will pass this found employee complete to the remove method. And after removing it, we have to save the changes. So we will say await MVC DB context dot save changes async. And with that, our employee will be removed. And after that, we want to redirect it back to the employee list page so that we can see what are the remaining employees left. So return a redirect to action. And we want to redirect to the index page, index action method. And that's it. And if the employee was not found, I will still just go ahead and display the action method index. So with those changes, I can come back to the view page and now fill in these details. So on this delete button, I want to talk to the employees controller and call the action method delete. Save these changes and run our application. We'll go to the employees page and we will delete this JSON employee. So I will view this employee and click on the delete button. And it has deleted the employee and returned the result back to the employees page. And we only have one employee left. So if I show you the database, it was showing 2 employees. Now, if I execute this query again, it's only showing 1 employee that is left. So we have successfully implemented the delete operation as well. We saw how easy it was to implement CRUD operations in an ASP.NET 6 MVC application. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to get more content like this one. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.